Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Neil Orfield at PlayerQDFS on Twitter, and I am here to talk about how I set up Fantasy Cruncher for FanDuel single games. In this case, I'll be talking about the Super Bowl coming up. Super excited about it, and looking forward to setting this up. What I'm doing right now, who knows, I might adjust it later on, but I'll show you how I generally set things up for FanDuel. I just did a DraftKings video, and I went through how I set things up for how I would set things up for smaller slates. I'm going to skip that on this one. I'm just going to talk about large field GPPs, how I would set up Fantasy Cruncher, and how I typically do that. So first thing I do is check that I'm on the right slate. I'm on the right slate. It's a Super Bowl. There's only one slate. Then I'm going to go into advanced options. So for FanDuel, yes, I keep this one unique player. Uh, Team salary, this is something that you usually want to set a cap. My cap adjusts based on the slate. I might leave 1,000 on the table. I might leave 3,000 on the table. Certain slates, I might leave 10,000 on the table. This slate looks like a slate where you might not need to leave too much money on the table if you want to have a great lineup. Really, this is a matter of what can you stomach. Are you okay having really ugly lineups? If you're okay having really ugly lineups to potentially get more unique and win more money if you win, leave 2,000 3,000 on the table. If you're not okay with that, you could just leave 1,500 on the table. You're still going to get somewhat unique, still win a lot of money with lineups that don't leave quite as much on the table. So I'm going to just go through right now and I'm going to leave 1,500 on the table, set this up at cap of 58,500. Offensive players versus defense, not applicable in FanDuel. There are no defenses. Global exposure settings. Typically, I set this up because I'm making 150 lineups. I set this at 30% of each player, um, and that's still gonna leave me with 150 of the top projected players, most likely guys like Cooper Cup. I'm still probably going to have 150 Cooper Cup lineups in my 500 set because that's 30% of 150. And then I'm going to use about 30% randomness, minimum projection included in the calculation. 3 is fine for FanDuel. You're gonna not really want anybody who projects worse than that. And if you do want players that project a little bit worse than that, then you can just give them slight boosts. So I'm going to leave that at 3. And then I'm going to go over to groups. I don't use any of these 3 tabs. I'm just going to go to groups, create a new group, and typically my groups revolve around the quarterbacks. I just want to make sure that if I have quarterbacks in my lineups, I have some kind of correlation. Uh, you can do this. You can split it up as quarterbacks MVP versus flex, or you can just do them in a group together. Sometimes I like to just do it in a group together. I'm going to do that here. I'm going to include a group where I have Stafford at MVP and also Stafford at quarterback. So this group, anytime I have Stafford in a lineup, I'm going to want to have at least one pass catcher. So I'm going to go through by position, and I'm going to find all of my Rams pass catchers and add them to the group. Now, again, I'm not adding them as key players. I'm just adding them to the group where Stafford is the key player. Scott I'm just looking at anybody who has a projection and a Rams logo getting added to this group. They might not necessarily make it in my player pool. So I've already done all of my tight ends and wide receivers. In this case, I'm going to add running backs as well. These Rams running backs don't seem to catch the ball a ton, but small sample size wouldn't be that shocking if Stafford throws a touchdown to Cam Akers. So I'm going to include him in the group as well. And then I'll also add MVPs, pass catchers. So Cooper Cup, Beckham. Again, I'm going to include the running backs here. That is a personal preference thing. I've said it before. I'll say it again. It's more of an art than a science. You could just include the wide receivers, the tight ends. I don't think you'd be wrong. That's not what I'm choosing to do because I like to get extra unique, and I don't think many people will be making Stafford Akers stacks or Stafford Henderson stacks, etc. All right, so this is my Stafford group. I'll rename it Stafford. Then I'll create a Burrow group. And same thing, I'm just going to add both of them in one group. Burrow at quarterback, Burrow at MVP. So anytime I have Joe Burrow in a lineup, I'm going to want to include at least one pass catcher from the Bengals. So I'm just going to add them one by one. And I'm going to once again include the running backs just to get a little bit more unique. None of these running backs are huge pass catchers, but Joe Mixon has been getting more involved. Samaje Perine often does catch passes, even though he doesn't have huge volume. And then I'll add the MVPs as well. I'm not including Chris Evans just because I don't think I'll be including Chris Evans in my player pool. That is counter to what I said earlier that I just had everybody, but he's one that I just skip over when I see the name. All right, and in this case, I'm not going to click the only apply plus minus adjustments. You could do that. I'm not even going to give players plus minus adjustments just yet. That's something I might do later on after I see what comes out in my crunches, see what kind of percentages I get of players. That's something that I'd be more likely to do if I split up the MVP versus the flex spot for Joe Burrow. I would be more likely if I have Joe Burrow at the MVP spot to give boosts to all of these pass catchers that are not obviously in the MVP spot. And I probably wouldn't include running backs. I would say if Joe Burrow is my MVP, I'm going to give boost to all of his pass catchers in the flex spot. And then sometimes I might even do, if I have a group that just has the Joe Burrow in the flex as my key player, I will go through and add boost to his pass catchers at the MVP spot. You can also see you can also set groups that show negative correlation. So sometimes you might say, if I have Jamar Chase at the MVP spot, so if I set Jamar Chase MVP as a key player, I'm not going to do it here because that's not a group that I'm creating, but it's a group that you could create. If I have Jamar Chase as a key player at the MVP spot, I might give negative boosts to all of the other Bengals pass catchers because if Jamar Chase is the MVP, that means that he's probably getting a lot of the volume from the Cincinnati pass catchers, and he's going to negatively correlate with guys like Uzoma, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. So sometimes I might create a group that does that gives negative boosts to other pass catchers if I have a pass catcher in the MVP spot. That's not something that I typically do. I should say that's something that you could do. I think it actually would make sense. It's something that I might start doing next year. I've been a little bit hesitant to change this year because I had a lot of success early on in the year doing just what I'm doing here with pretty minimal changes to my groups. But I think going forward, I think to get better and better, you want to always be improving. I could see myself going forward making that change where if I have a player like Jamar Chase in the MVP spot, I give negative boost to other pass catchers, or I could even set a rule where if I have Jamar Chase in the MVP spot, I say at most one other pass catcher from the Bengals receiving groups. There's a lot of different groups that you could create that would make some sense. I'm not doing that here. I'm just creating these quarterback groups, and that's all I'm going to do for now. I will save this. Again, I don't even know if this is necessary, but I do it just to be safe. Saving that as FanDuel, and that's all I'm going to do for now. And before I go in and show you how I might change things here, I'm going to tell you that our sponsor today is No House Advantage. No House Advantage is bringing you a different way to enjoy DFS with player prop contests. It's 100% peer-to-peer to help level the playing field. Over 500 player props are offered, and all new users get a $25 deposit bonus with promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. You have mass entry capability, you have big prize pools, and you can beat your friends, not the house. Use Awesemo's No House Advantage projections and optimal lineup tool to help you take down big prizes. You can download it in the App Store or play on nohouseadvantage.com. Okay, back to the FanDuel settings. So I showed on the DraftKings video, sometimes I like to go into on DraftKings it's captain, on FanDuel it's MVP. Sometimes I like to go into the MVP spot on DraftKings and I'll change this down to 10%. So I get a wide variety of players in the captain spot on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you don't necessarily want as wide of a range just because you don't get any the salary doesn't change based on who's in the MVP spot. So it's kind of a narrow range of players who are likely to be the MVP. You're not going to get a guy who is just minimum salary. You're not going to get a Ben Skowronek MVP. It's highly unlikely that Ben Skowronek is going to be the MVP on FanDuel because to be the MVP, you need to generally be the actual highest scoring player on the slate, and that's just not going to happen for Ben Skowronek. Whereas on DraftKings, sometimes that will be the case. Not that he's the highest scoring, but you don't need to be the highest scoring player on DraftKings. You just need to be a player that allows you to have the best lineup because the salary is more restrictive on DraftKings because you get if you're spending up for a player at captain on DraftKings, if you're using a guy like Cooper Cup, it's also 1.5 his salary. So you're being really restrictive for the rest of your lineup. Sometimes it's better to have a guy like Ben Skowronek who allows you to get to many different studs. Whereas here on FanDuel, that's not really the case. You don't get any kind of bonus. You don't get any kind of advantage from having a lower projected player in the MVP spot. So I'm not going to adjust this down to 10%. I do sometimes I'll change it to 20% just because in a game like this in particular, it's not that unlikely that somebody like T. Higgins or Odell Beckham sneaks into the captain spot. Excuse me, and they will be pretty unique. Not many people are going to have T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd or Odell Beckham Jr., Van Jefferson. There are a lot of these guys that just don't project as well as the quarterbacks or as Cooper Cup, but they still, the odds are there that they can have a 2 touchdown game and that they outscore their quarterback and make it into the MVP spot in the optimal lineup. So I want to include them, but they're still not as likely. I'm not going to get to guys like Blanton and Higby, I don't think, in the MVP spot, even though it would be unique. It's just really unlikely to happen. So what I do, I mentioned earlier, I'm making this large field GPP. I'm making 150 lineups. So I'm going to use my projections. I'm going to shoot out 500 lineups, and then I'm going to whittle it down to 150. Typically, I'm just taking the 150 top projected, but that is typically after I make changes to projections so that I can get to a player pool that I like. Okay, so I spit out 150. Now I'm going to sort my lineups by my projected, unselect all of them, try to find around the 150th lineup, select lineups below. Went too far down. I usually do. All right. So here's what I got. I've got 150 lineups here. I can see in my MVP spot, I'm using 6 different MVPs. That's probably about what I want. I don't even know if I want Cam Akers. Probably he's a running back who'll have high volume. Wouldn't be that shocking if he scores 2 touchdowns in this game. So I'm pretty okay with this setup here. These different MVPs. Honestly, sometimes I see other top players will just 100% exclude Matthew Stafford, 100% exclude Cooper Cup. They like to just get weird with captain. If you get weird with captain on FanDuel in particular, you don't need to get as weird with your salary. If you're using somebody like, I guess none of these guys are that high owned, so it's not as applicable, but the higher the ownership of projected ownership for somebody in the captain spot, the more salary you probably need to leave on the table to get unique and make more money when you win. In this case, nobody really projects for that crazy high ownership in the MVP spot. So I'm okay with having relatively high ownership of everybody. There's nobody that I'm going to leave out of my player pool. But for me, I would typically now look through how much exposure I'm getting to different players and adjust projections. That is not something that I would recommend doing unless you are a very experienced player. You know what you want in your different spots. Um, but for me, I'll go through and I'll in this case, so in FanDuel in particular, you basically want the 5 highest projected players most of the time, or the highest point per dollar players in your lineup. You really need everybody to do pretty well in your lineup. You're not going to have somebody who is just super cheap and allows you to get to everybody else because nobody gets that cheap on FanDuel, and you only have 5 spots. So you really need everybody to put up some points. But guys like Samaje Perine, we just saw it in the last Bengals game. He scored a touchdown, put up a lot of points. It wouldn't be that weird if Samaje Perine is one of the top scorers in this game. It's not what we expect. He's not projected that well. Currently, I'm not getting to any, but he's only projected for 2% ownership. So he's the kind of player that I might give a big boost to, try to get to, 10, 15% of Samaje Perine. I don't know what it's going to take to get around that number. I'm going to give him a pretty big boost right away. And I'll look through it, see if there are other players like that who I think I'd like to get more of than I get naturally. On here, Van Jefferson, glad to see I'm getting a decent amount because I think that I would want a decent amount of Van Jefferson. Odell Beckham, I'd probably want a little bit more than I'm currently getting of Odell Beckham. I'll change his projections to make sure that I get more and get some of them in the MVP spot. Kendall Blanton versus Tyler Higbee, that's just something we're going to have to monitor. If Tyler Higbee's a full go, maybe you don't want any Kendall Blanton. I still think Tyler Higbee's a little bit of a risk, so I think there's some chance that you want some Blanton lineups, even if Higbee is playing, just because I think there's some chance that Higbee might not be a full go. Blanton could score a touchdown, get in there. It might not be a huge high-scoring game, and he's only projected for 2.3% ownership. So I'd probably give Kendall Blanton some kind of boost to make sure that I get to a little bit of them. But again, I'm going to go through after I make these adjustments. I will go through, do the same thing I just did. I'd split out 500, sort by my projected, look at the top 150, see if I'm getting exposure numbers that I like, and then I keep going through and doing the same thing. It's not something I'd recommend unless you are a pretty advanced player. If you've been playing for many years, I've been playing since 2013. If you're in your first year, you might not want to do it unless you're confident that you're able to do it in a thoughtful way that makes sense. Then have at it. But as I'm going through, I'm always looking at how do these projections, the changes I'm making, how do they compare to other players in the same salary range? So, for example, if I'm assuming Tyler Higbee's a full go, I'm going to want more Higbee than Kendall Blanton. I see they're the same salary, so that's why I set him at about 7. I know that I want to get a good amount less Blanton than I do of Higbee. I think 7 might put me in the range where I'm getting a little bit of Blanton, maybe a little bit more than his projected ownership, but I'm still going to get more Higbee because most likely if Higbee's going, he's going to be the player that you want more of. So you always need to be looking at how do the salaries compare to other players and how do their projections compare, and be thoughtful about any changes you're making to projections. In this case, I just made this change to Odell Beckham to I actually projected him now higher than Tyler T. Higgins. I don't know that's something I usually don't want to do because they're the same price. If he were more expensive than T. Higgins, I would be okay with giving him higher projections. Typically, I don't want to leapfrog somebody. There are cases where I do. Usually, I'll probably, since they're the same projection, I should be changing this to maybe 12.4. I'd rather have the higher projected guy more often because he's not getting the ownership isn't all that different anyway. These are the things that I'm looking at as I'm making these adjustments. Again, don't do it unless you're pretty experienced or you're pretty confident that you're going to be able to do it in a thoughtful way. But that's all I'm going to do for now. That's generally how I set up my FanDuel single game on Fantasy Cruncher. If you have different ways, suggestions for how you think I could improve this process, I'm listening. Comment on the video below. Love to hear it. I'm always adjusting. I feel like everybody should be constantly adjusting the way they do things, getting better year over year. And yeah, I'm always listening, always making changes. You probably should be too. Would love to hear what you have to say in the video down below. Thanks for watching. Again, I'm Neil Orfield at PlayerQDFS on Twitter. Would love to hear from you. Thanks.